It's really like, what's the world that awaits them after this? And I think fundamentally it's like, unless you know what you're about, unless you have an opinion about how you want this to go, you're just going to be doing what other people tell you to do. And I feel a lot of the educational system kind of sets you up to like answer questions politely and perfectly, and get your cookie and your gold star and move on. And when it comes to the subject matter, so we're talking video games, we're talking strategy, we're talking innovation. The principle is always something along the lines of you're going to be asked to answer a question with imperfect information.
Welcome to Unboxing, Play and Profit for the Gaming Curious. I'm Lane Nooney.
And I'm Joost van Dreunen.
And we're here digging deep on why games matter in today's economy. On the docket today, Friday, May 1st, we're doing an end-of-year teaching roundup with Joost, looking at what worked this semester, what absolutely did not, and what he'll be doing differently next time around. All that and more with your two very summer-ready co-hosts, but first, we've got some catching up to do. Hey there, Jolly Boy. Where's your turtle?
Oh, turtle is sunbathing. I should change my seat. Hold on. That's what I.
Yeah, this is the premium content that everyone doesn't pay for.
This is behind the paywall.
Yeah, it should be. We got to get our Patreon fired up over the summer.
Look, turtle, ready station.
Turtle
manning the eagle's nest. The indoor turret.
Keeping Joost on point.
Safe, really, just surveying the.
How are you? Are you feeling ready? You got a big event tonight. We're recording this Thursday late morning, but tonight you're interviewing I don't know how to say it. How do you say his name? It's like Reggie.
The Reginator.
The Reginator.
Reggie Fils-Aimé.
Fils-Aimé. That's right. You're from the continent. You can.
Yeah, I'm from a place where multiple languages exist at the same time.
Yeah. Most embarrassing part of my semester was having to give a whole lecture about Minitel, and every time I had to say a word in French, I was just like, I'm gonna stop. Like,
I mean, it's a slippery language. So I'm excited for it.
So Reggie, you fireside but no fire tonight.
Well, I hope there is some fire. I mean,
can you give us a sneak peek of what hot topics will be coming up?
Well, it's a business class, so I'm gonna ask him about business models, and we're gonna talk about games, of course. But I want to kind of like how do you turn a Japanese company like that, to your will? Like, how do you do that?
Should we? I mean, we didn't even say. We shouldn't assume that everyone listening knows who Reggie is. Who is Reggie? Joost?
He's the former president and COO of Nintendo America.
There we go. Let's be good teachers here.
He ran basically. I mean, he was the face and the engine behind Nintendo's success in the US and arguably globally through 5 different device launches, starting with the DS. He did the Wii, he did the Wii U, and then ultimately the Switch. And so he's been around for a long time. I missed one, didn't I? So he's a legend in many ways. Like, he's made famous early on by going on stage at E3, I think in 2004, something like that. He was, and his line was, "My name is Reggie. I'm here to kick ass and take names, and we are about games." Something along those lines. It was, and that was his opening line. A very aggressive, very bold, sort of different sound that they brought to the table. That different from what Nintendo had done previously, and it totally worked. Like, it sort of put him on the map. So he's an interesting character because he would bring sort of this Bronx, not gruffness, but sort of, like forcefulness to the conversation. Whereas, of course, Nintendo had been much more polite and a little bit soft-handed in so many ways. Anyway, so he was there for 16 years. He saw through the Nintendo DS, the Wii, the 3DS, the Wii U, and the Switch. And then he got out in 2019, right before the pandemic, and he's been doing podcasts and advisory and investing, et cetera, et cetera. And so now he seems to be turning more towards, wanting to talk about business, innovation, and how to start your career. And so I'm curious to see what he has to say. Like, I mean, this is one of those people that's been doing it for a long time and did so successfully. He's larger than life. I met him once before, years ago. He's one of those executives that's terrifying because he's incredibly well prepared, but he also has, yeah, no, he's like, he does his homework. Like he goes over it relentlessly, and so you just kind of like you can't really roll up and like, oh hey, what's up, yo? It's like he doesn't have time for that. He's nice, but it's just like he's very mission first. So I'm curious to see what he has to say, what it's been like,
So have
and
you
how he
just
reflects on the
been have
industry.
you been hitting the books, have you been prepping your ass off for this?
Yeah, I spent a day rereading his book. It's he wrote a book in 2022, Disrupting the Game, and it's just sort of a string of anecdotes and principles and so what text boxes of what he's come up with. But he's very it's very clear, it's very focused,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that. And so you can read it through in like an afternoon. It's not
Wonder if he
the
gets book club scammed.
yeah, I bet he does. I bet he does.
Yeah.
But he's, yeah, I did some prep work, of course. I could say, I
That's a
mean, I
big
do this with
deal.
all of the CEOs, whatever that show up. But it's more like how do you? So the academic environment is always like an executive comes into a classroom, they kind of let their guard down a little bit. It's more academic or sort of sparring with
But this,
questions.
this is also different than what you've done before because this is happening at Game Center instead of at the business school. So
Yes,
there'll probably be a much stronger presence of game development students and maybe having to cross the water to go to the second class borough of Brooklyn, New York will shake off some of those sternies.
I'd be such a
I
hater.
mean, those there was some
What's that about?
what
It's dirty.
I don't know. There was when I came to the last one, I was like, these people got some weird fucking energy. Like,
Hmm.
these like business student, like somebody was clear, like multiple people seemed like they were trying to get investments for shit. I was just like, what's happening right now? This is like, is someone a covert like blog reporter? Like, what's happening inside this
Yeah,
room?
well, that's probably my fault. So the way that I think of it is like, hey, we're here, let's all hang out together. And so I open up those firesides to the general public. Like, yep, anybody wants to come. So I send it around to people I know, people in the industry. We still vet people, or at least like make them register so we can kind of
Yeah, that's
see
not
who's who.
vetting. It just means that NYU has their email address,
Yeah, no, that's
theoretically.
and so I did not do the best job in that regard because 70 extra people show up and there's going to be like one or two people in there with like internet-based questions.
It's
And
weird vibes. Yeah.
yeah, that was no, and that was a weird one too because that was I think you saw the Unity one,
Yeah,
and I remember that one guy
yeah.
popping up.
The guy who had come in to kind of reorg Unity. Yeah,
Yes, and
yeah.
it's and so yeah, I find it interesting just to kind of like see what people do, but also like the audience, like students tend to be kind of shy more than anything else. They should embrace it with both hands, but then you get one of these like internet retail investors, and they're like, well, what about blah blah blah, and they want to get something, and
Yeah.
CEOs are very simple, like they're trained to not answer stupid questions like that, and so it's
Not like
bulletproof, but
professors, right? You're like,
it
oh,
closes them
I'm
off.
obligated morally to engage with this very bad
I
question
can't
that I've
help
just been
myself
asked.
but to
Yeah.
speak at length on this topic now. It's true. So so we're still finding the formula, but I feel like, so the whole principle of my class was always bringing different faculties in the room together. And sure, it's a business school class, but
Yeah.
I have game design students every semester. I have like
It's it's
five
exciting.
or six of them.
Have you hosted an event like this with a business CEO at the Game Center before?
Not at the game center. No,
Okay. I
I've
like this little collabo. I feel like we could get an unholy triad between Stern, MCC, and the Game Center. Like there's some sort of opportunity here that we all just need to get drunk enough to figure out, you know?
I just this was always the plan, Lane. I'm just so happy like you just like figuring this out
I
now.
just caught up 4 years later. Like,
Listen, I taught this shit.
Naomi Clark, I know you're listening. I need you to
Get in there.
get in
Listen, my
there.
class, the genesis goes in 20 seconds as follows. I started at MCC, which is your folk, right? That's your department. And that was fun and fine. Then Tish said, well, why don't you come teach it here? Because we have all the toys. So then I moved it over to Broadway where they had like trolleys with like Xboxes and all the equipment. So we could play in the classroom. Then Tish started to move to Poly in Brooklyn and said, sure, I'll go there because it's a bigger room, it's a bit more breathing space, more fun. And then the classrooms became too small because Stern students had figured it out. So then I would have like people line up against the wall auditing the class, and it's like this is not manageable anymore. They went to the dean at Stern, and on condition that we would cross-list the class, they would give me rooms that would fit like 60 to 100 people. So that's why it's at Stern now. But it was always this sort of collaborative
Mm,
mindset.
mm.
I'm glad that we now have people in place that see it the same way, that we've reached that
Yeah,
moment. I think, Me Too is instrumental in that. You've been instrumental in that. So I'm excited to see what shows up tonight. It was sold out
I'll
within
be there.
seconds.
Yep, I'll be there. So,
Did
you
you properly register? Because, you can't just have
know, no,
strays.
but I have a
Okay.
faculty ID. That means I can go anywhere.
Yeah, okay. Well, I have own private security.
Do you? Is there private security at this?
No, no, there's not.
Okay. I mean, I've met NYU campus security. I am not afraid. So,
You don't fear. Yeah, I know
no.
you've met them very personally.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it's
So,
supposed to be. I
so,
mean,
so
there's security, but it's
this
not
is one of the
militaristic.
reasons. One, it's been kind of a slow news week. Two, you've got this big thing going on this week. That's why we were trying to keep this episode low lift. And you have the blessing of teaching your video game class every semester.
Yes,
I only
so
teach
blessed.
mine in the fall, but I thought
Mhm.
we could sort of go through, lessons learned this semester. So what seemed to be, are you picking up shifts in what students are interested in talking about? Is there stuff you've implemented that or topics that you think need changing out? Sort of give me your what worked, what probably needs and what didn't, and what probably needs some reworking for next time.
Yeah. So what really worked, and we've talked about this before, was the exit tickets.
Oh,
So
my idea.
ask. Yeah, no, and and of course I've been parading it around with other people that teach. They're like, yeah, that's a fun. You should do that. Yeah, like, I'm just discovering, the wheel all on my own. And it was last semester was a bit like there was sort of the beta. It's very hectic, and you do need to give it like a time and a place. So when you ask 60 students, like, oh, why don't you write down the question that you would have liked to see answered or whatever? Because then all of a sudden everybody starts scuffling about to get pieces of paper and pencils, and then they all come down to like hand it to you, like, no, put it over there. So that organization, so the logistics of that was one thing, but the timing was another one. So the I spoke to someone who said he does the exit tickets. He goes over them at the beginning of class. So where I would do current events, like this other person suggested to do them at the start of class because then you kind of get everybody involved and you can talk about their questions and then you address them directly, and it sort of breaks the ice in a big way. So I really like this semester went much better, but I had to like accommodate sort of like the cycle for it. It's like, okay, we're now going to do nothing but these exit tickets. I find it very difficult still once I say the word to get everybody to pay attention to anything else after that. So
Hmm.
I've learned, but that worked really well. I think it's incredibly rich material. It's incredibly clear, like what I suck at explaining. Like, oh yeah, like you spent 20
Yeah,
minutes building this whole thing, and they're like, yeah, but I didn't get any of this. Like, explain to me
yeah. I
again.
found I found that they're very useful for that too. That
So
when
that's
you're
a big
really
highlight for me.
flubbing trying to explain a concept, they will let you know. You know.
Yeah, they'll tell you like, yo, I don't get any of this. So that one was good. Then I started to get ambitious with like the things I want my students to do. So over the years, I've had this feedback where it's like, well, there's only a midterm and a final. Like, what am I supposed to like? That's like basically it's like all or nothing for your final grade. But if your final paper is trash, like, sucks to be you. So to give them extra touch points, I make them do a game profile. It's sort of like play your favorite game for a couple hours and give me a 2 to 3 page profile on them. And I think that that was a little too much to ask because
Too
it's
much to ask?
yeah, it's like like the amount of effort for both the students and for the TA myself is like it's basically somewhere in between a midterm and a final in terms of setting it up, getting it done, grading it, and just doing the admin work. So I'm not sure that I'm going to go the same way next time. So next time, for instance, I'll instead of like a letter grade, I'll probably do like just pass fail because it was just a lot to do and there was a lot of different variables. I hadn't really thought it through, but I wanted them to kind of take a look at a game beyond just playing the game. Also, like, what's the business behind it? Who actually makes this thing? Who's the studio of records making this thing, and what's the revenue model, and when was it published? What's it
Hmm.
about? Kind of
Hmm.
just give me the
I
lay of
have
the
I
land.
have I have thoughts about this, but we'll discuss about how to. I have advice possibly about
Oh, well, he's
assignment
still my
scaffolding and things like that.
heart.
But
So that one didn't go as well. That's I mean to your point. I'd love to hear more from your end, but it's the I want to give them more touch points with regards to like what do I let me get you to a good grade. Let me involve you. The Stern students are very focused on getting good grades.
yeah,
I don't know if that's the same in your experience.
I
It's a
have found that they tend they do you know at least the ones who usually wind up in my class, they know how to be hard workers. I will say that for them. And they are diligent, they know how to come to your office hours, and they're there to perform and to be seen performing. Right. And
mhm.
that is a pretty kind of, sometimes they're my best students. They may not always go in for my anti-capitalism, but like they can really analyze the shit out of something from like they'll tolerate me for the fun of the class, and then they can really do they get the economic analysis part of it, I
That's
think.
funny.
So wait, so how many things are you grading in a class?
So, I mean, you've been sort of spooking me with this. So I do attendance, which is by way of the exit tickets. I
Okay.
do the field exercise, to sort of describe a game that you're playing, a midterm, which is the barbecue memo, and then a final, which is the final is still like 40 or 50% of your grade, and that's like a 10-page paper. So those are my
Midterm, final, exit tickets, which are a proxy for attendance. I'm gonna put my director of undergraduate studies hat here on now, and then you have this kind of games paper. And what's the midterm?
the midterm is a barbecue memo.
What the fuck is that?
Yeah, like see, like so so like in my mind or my experience over the last 25 years, every once in a while you're like on the escalator or in the elevator with some senior person, right? You go to a barbecue and oh look, it's the CMO of your favorite video game company. She's right there also drinking a beer, and you get a chance to talk to this person for 5 or 10 minutes, and you have an opinion about whatever they're working on because you've been playing that game or that franchise for years. What kind of conversation would you have? Like what? And this person listens to you for 10 minutes and then says, "That's really interesting, Jessica, that you would have such a strong opinion about Final Fantasy or Resident Evil. We should totally make an anime. Why don't you write me a memo that I can present to the team, and then we'll go from there." So write that memo. That's the sort of rough prompt, and then you can pick whatever you want. You can do, head of strategy, the CEO, the CMO, whatever. Pick your flavor. But it's really about practicing this idea that you every once in a while get into this moment where if you have been thinking about something for a minute, you just come across as more confident. You have an
And
opinion about
how
stuff.
long how long is this document?
3, 4 pages. It
Okay,
is not.
so
It's
so
not rigid.
basically, so you have 3 4 pages. The games paper is 2 to 3, and the final paper is about 10.
Uh
So
oh. Uh
so
oh.
so, did you
Where's it?
see?
Where's
I brought
this?
out a notepad.
Oh, we're counting. Okay.
Why?
Okay.
Well, I mean,
Count
the
on.
thing that I'm noticing is so your assessments are 3 papers, right? Call them
Mm-hmm.
what you want, but that's what they are. They're 3 papers,
Mm-hmm.
each which is has a totally different genre and requires a totally different style of research, probably, right? And so
Fair.
one,
Fair enough.
I would imagine that the students are so one. There's like diversity in genre format, but they don't do anything in your class except write. Right? There's no class presentation. There's no group work project. There's a kind of like there's not like you could do something that's like where the students keep like a handwritten notebook and they have to write 10 entries on something over the course of the semester, and at the end of that you grade it, and you just like make sure they did them or did them to a certain degree of completion or something like that. Other things you can do if you're trying to create more grade touch points
Hmm.
across. So one thing is like everything you are grading them on is an extended written work, right? And so you can think
That's
about.
what it called. That's what it's called.
There's not a book that calls it that, but like they're never writing less than 3 pages for an assignment, right? And so you can think about other ways to break up writing, which is like, do you want many multiple short, which is kind of
Hmm.
what the exit tickets model, but the exit tickets are really just like a pass fail metric. And so there's ways to create, so like journal, like a kind of thing where students have to write multiple journal entries. A lot of ways, I think before AI, ways a lot of faculty did this was like discussion board posts. I never liked that kind of stuff, but that's one technique a lot of faculty used.
Oh,
uh,
the Brightspace stuff where you have to like post something on
yeah,
a
yeah, I
website.
mean, i'd
Oh, no
rather
thanks.
i'd rather chew glass than like interact with a discussion
Yeah,
board,
sign me up for
and
the glass too.
but like that's one model for taking a desire for an assessment and breaking it up into a smaller, more dialogic form of writing. And
Hmm.
then the other thing you can do is take a big 10-page paper and break it into component pieces across a semester. So you could say,
Hmm.
all right, like, this is a paper in 3 parts. Part one requires that you give me a bibliography that does X, Y, and Z. Part two
Hmm.
is the construction of your argument. And by the end of that, what it usually does, or what it can help with, is producing a stronger end result out the other side so that the assignments in the class build upon one another in this way, right? Or maybe the memo forms the basis of what the final paper is supposed to be about, right? You can think about ways to like interlink them. I had a similar problem where, and then of course there's always good old fashioned tests and quizzes, which in the age of AI, a lot of faculty are kind of going back to because they're quick to grade. Oh, Yost has to answer the door or the phone? I can't tell. I can't tell. Everybody, what you're listening to here is
Thank you.
just some live pedagogic crit. I hope you're enjoying what you have to offer, and if you'd like more, like and subscribe.
And we're back. Sorry,
And
the
we're
bell rang.
back. Yeah, so when I had this problem, so yeah, first of all, like many faculty are going back to kind of handwritten activities in a classroom because the cheating is out of control, right? The AI usage is extreme.
Hmm.
And you're getting, I don't know, I mean, I put a pin in that
Well,
question, but when I
there's
had to deal with this, I took my encyclopedia project and I broke it into 2 parts.
yeah.
And there was like, you have to give me the first 2 sections, and that is due in the first like 7 weeks of class to kind of force you to do it. It gives me an immediate metric on whether or not you understand the assignment, whether you've done any work, what kind of student you are. And then at the end, you take that same work and you apply it toward the final assessment.
Hmm. Hmm.
But also, my students have a presentation, right? So
Oh Lord.
they get to have. Well, I teach 50, right? So only 2 of those kids go in class, and then the rest of them make videos that my TA grades.
They present over videos.
So because I have 50 students, I can't let them all present in class.
That's why I don't.
Yeah, so
I
2 of them present. Like basically, I do a survey at the beginning that says who wants to present in class. I'll give you 2 extra points, extra credit if you do, to like acknowledge that it's harder to do this live. And usually enough students are willing to do that they will sign up for it, and then everyone else like records a Zoom or does a voiceover, a PowerPoint, or something like that. Like you.
sorry, like it's
um, but
it's
anyway,
like one
that
of the
was,
gestures.
yeah. So
That's
you
really
you can
interesting.
think about ways to diversify the kinds of learning activities they're doing. You know, And the kind and just so that the outputs are also like just more different from each other, but also how they can like interconnect across the semester.
Right, right. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. I think that's very interesting. I always, so I sort of selfishly or arrogantly have always put students through this process of like, if you can write it well, then that's the evidence I need to see whether or not you gave it any thought, if you have any ideas here that you spent any kind of effort on, as opposed to repeating what I just said during the
I
semester,
mean,
right?
what
So I'm very biased towards writing. I realize that too. I express myself in that way, and so that's how I like to digest other people's ideas too. So, just why don't you write it down in a paragraph, and I'll let you know if I get it, or if it sounded clear to me, or if there's something here that could be expanded on, or whatever. And so I've always made them do that. It was also because that way we would have, I mean, the class started with 7 students and now it's like 50, 60. So it never really changed that part. But when you have 7 papers to grade, that's easy enough. But when you have 60, all of a sudden it's all this work. So I never really updated that part. But what you're suggesting makes sense. And I hadn't considered doing recorded video presentations.
what just because also like different kinds of assessments speak to different learning styles, and so
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I was taught in my pedagogic training that I received actually at Kansas State University was to
Mm-hmm.
like was to learn how to develop kind of different kinds of activities. You don't want so many that they have like no relationship to each other, but you want to give them different students different ways of showing proficiency, right? So I know faculty who are going into like reading quizzes. Start a class, quiz, right? Takes 5
Mm-hmm.
minutes, right? But or like open like you have to bring a physical notebook and you start with um I mean you teach your class once a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got colleagues over here who are starting their classes now, these what 2 hour and 45-minute classes they teach with 30 minutes of like journaling, right? Like the I one thing I haven't heard you talk about is the impact. I mean, every single one of these just seems like a recipe for a student plugging it into the homework machine. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious how much AI you're getting or how much
Oh,
AI you
a
suspect.
substantial amount. A
Yeah,
substantial amount. So I can
which
see.
undermines the whole exercise, right?
Well,
It depends how much you care,
I have strong feelings. No, I care greatly, but I have strong feelings about it as well. Like, and so the thing is like I will not make a horse drink. Like, it's just not happening. Like, then this horse will die of thirst. Like, and so my experience is like, look, you are going to, in some capacity, be a knowledge worker of sorts, either in finance or marketing or design or whatever. And you're going to be building things, you're going to be solving problems using some kind of existing conversation, whether that's in how, what font to choose or what color palette or whatever, or whether to like build a financial model around some kind of strategic decision or acquisition. And I mean, it's very simple to me. It's like you are as good as you have invested time in it, and so it's not something that you can download and it's ready to go. Like it's writing is exactly that. It's like you can only get better at it by just doing it, right? It's sort of as simple as that. So yeah, you can rely on AI to give you structure and chew your food for you, but like you don't go through the process of externalizing, of coming up with your opinion, of having original thought in any of that. So I encourage them to embrace AI because I think it's a catalyst for a lot of thinking. I think it allows them to scale the effort in the same way that it's clearer for people that people can communicate more clearly when they use spell checking and when they use word processing software. Like if you give me 60 handwritten 10-page papers, like I'll be dead by the third one, right? And nobody wants to write 10 pages with pen. But it's a so all these technologies kind of help. At the same time, you still have to hold the line. And so if you
Yeah, but it doesn't sound
veer
like
too
you're holding
far,
the line
no,
at all.
I make them tell me when you use AI, show me how you've
And
used
you
it.
think that they're actually telling you the truth?
Some don't, and but the thing is like if I see it but I can't prove it, at some point, like part of I mean this is my educational style. At some point, like I'm not this is but I'm not babysitting here. Like I'm trying to like I come at this from the world where like you will lose your job on the drop of a hat. So if you want to be a person that's replaceable, if you want to have no sense of what you're about, then by all means, just like, play the word guessing machine to its logical conclusion, which is that you become mediocre and, that's fine. But this is an opportunity to put something of yourself into an exercise. If I can't make you do that, then you were probably lost already, and the world will tell you as much. Like my grade
Well,
will not directionally change that trajectory. So I
I
feel like the self-responsibility, the self-reliance is
I,
key in
I
this.
I think that's a kind of way of avoiding the issue as an instructor, right?
Okay,
Like
let's
they
hear it.
they are like their brains are still in development. They have internalized a high degree of intolerance for difficulty through an educational system that in one point has been for many of them already kind of fucked with because of COVID, right? And so now we're getting these students that went through COVID at like different stage, like the ones in
Mm-hmm.
my classroom now went through at the end of middle school, early high school, and they have a whole different set of problems, right? Because of the kind of fundamental skills they were supposed to learn during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what I think that part of what our responsibility is to do is to kind of show them that there can be is to the class is a bounded structure in which we also get to demonstrate the ways that like pleasure in learning and accepting challenges can be found when you can't get when you have no other out. And so like
So you
we do
box it
have to
into.
you just kind of have to enforce certain kinds of limitations that I mean, and that is like a principle of education kind of no matter what, right?
Mm.
And I think the frictionlessness of AI, right? It's not spell check, it's not a word processor. It's a thing that can take a complicated assignment and do it in about 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the like I do think we have a kind of it feels like playing whack-a-mole if you treat it hysterically, but there is a kind of interesting thing where it's like we're going back to teaching them like how to touch a piece of paper and how to like actually do a reading, how to sit with something for a period of time. These are kind of ancient skills that are lost in that there's very
Mm-hmm.
little nothing about the way they've been educated thus far has built a tolerance for that in many cases, right? And so yeah, this kind of like, well, I'm going to put all the autonomy on this 19-year-old who can like barely get themselves out of bed correctly to figure out that they're going to make the morally imperative important decision to not use the homework machine. Like, come on, you know, like like their
But
brains aren't
when
even fully
then?
developed, you
When?
know,
When
like
they're 23?
and they're like more like when they're 26 or 27, like their brains aren't fully baked until the mid 20s. And speaking for who I was in my early 20s, I certainly think that's correct.
Yeah, it's an interesting
Um,
question. I mean, like, look, can I make life harder for myself? Sure, right?
it doesn't have to also be that, right? Like,
Well, it's the, but it's not about me or the investment or effort I make. It's really like, what's the world that awaits them after this? And I think fundamentally it's like, unless you know what you're about, unless you have an opinion about how you want this to go, you're just going to be doing what other people tell you to do. And I feel a lot of the educational system kind of sets you up to like answer questions politely and perfectly, and get your cookie and your gold star and move on. And when it comes to the subject matter, so we're talking video games, we're talking strategy, we're talking innovation. The principle is always something along the lines of you're going to be asked to answer a question with imperfect information. That's sort of that's sort of the thinking that drives the class. Like, how is it that, you know, the largest companies with all of the resources make catastrophic mistakes? Like, why did Concord fail when Sony launched its shooter after all this time of development, all this money? Why were they so wrong? Like, how is that even possible that the incumbent, the top console maker, gets it that wrong, for instance? And so let's walk through that problem. And so it's to teach them, is like, even out in the wild, what seems to be the case is that the largest companies don't necessarily always get everything right. So how do you think about that? How is that possible? What goes into the product? And so there's principles like a mental model and sort of the mental inertia that comes with change. How do you innovate around these things? What are some of the market signals that you could pick up on early on? But it's never you never get a full set of information to go, oh, here's all the ingredients, and I just organize them appropriately, and I can answer the question correctly. Because there is no correct answers in that world, it's not necessarily. And so that ambiguity for me is enough to say, unless you have the curiosity and hopefully the talent to think about these things, there's no amount of me forcing you to do this either handwritten or with multiple choice that's going to get you there. That's the nature of the class, right? And so if you're truly curious about this, then you will identify your own corner in this world. And is it an easy grade? No, not really. Obviously, like as a result, like not everybody gets the grade that they want. But this is my way of forcing you to start thinking more seriously about it, because the world doesn't care. The world doesn't care that you can't get yourself out of bed on time. That's not the world that these kids will grow up in, right? It's sort of expected in so many ways. They're like, what are office hours going to be for them? What are work hours? You talk about labor. Did they get a 5 day work week? These kids work nonstop. That's all they do, and they're being primed to work 60 hour. That's the norm, 60, 80 hours a week. They get internships for no money for months, so like, so my version of my parental input is a bit like, it's cool, it's a dojo, it's safe, we're going to have a conversation, I will help, but you got to decide where you want to go with this. You got to decide what you want to. And some people just, haven't decided yet, or they don't want to do that yet. They just want to kind of coast through class. You can do that too, sure, and be my guest. But in the long term, the world will come and check with you. And so that's how I think of this, which is, perhaps that's a bit tough. Maybe it's too Dutch for the American system. Maybe it's old-fashioned or imperfect. I'm happy to take notes on how to improve that, but I just fundamentally don't want to encourage people to sit back while we have them, answer numbered questions.
I mean, I don't think that's what I'm suggesting, right?
I don't think that's what she says, but that's sort of that's what I'm railing against, and somewhere along the line sits you, so you get swooped up in that because
I
you're
think
you're very
nowhere along
artisanal. You said you're
nowhere
very
along that
artisanal,
line do I sit, right? I think it's about cultivating opportunities for them to actually practice these skills for real,
right?
rather than, I mean, I listen to that and I'm sort of like, yeah, man, you just don't want to change how you've been running your class for like 10 years, because that's a pain in the ass,
But I
you know?
do. I did
Like,
the exit tickets. I got the field exercise.
the
I
exit
think.
tickets are not a substantive alteration in the way a class functions at a pedagogic level, right?
So
Like,
what would be a
I
substantive
mean,
change?
well, we've actually talked about something like this before. We talked about like an in-class assignment where you sort of give them a case brief, right? About like precisely this thing you were talking about. You give them a stack of incomplete information
Hmm.
and they have the class to like assess it and write a report based on it, right? I have a faculty member in a couple of them actually are going back to live debate. So stuff that actually models what it looks like to have to like think in the wild, right? Where you can't have your computer kind of spitting out the right answer for you all the time. You have to be able to put together concepts. Like many of these students don't even have the basics of conceptual thinking. And like
That's
that
mind-boggling.
that cliff like is so big, that like the that just to just sort of like create opportunities where these like skills are practiced and have to be practiced earnestly and for real, right?
All right. Listen, I'm open to change these things because I do recognize. I mean, so we talk about this at the end of the semester for a reason, because I do at the end of the semester always kind of do my own little post mortem, and I immediately award myself a gold star because good job, Yost, best
Yeah, you got
teacher.
through the semester. Good job.
Nobody yelled at me. Yay! No,
Like quizzing
it's
a
big.
student live, like engaging with a student presentation, right? They got nowhere to go. You're asking them questions. They got to answer you, right, in
Mm.
session.
Well,
Um,
so here's one thing I'm thinking, right? And the two motivators, I'll reserve those for later. But so one thing that I like that also works well in business, not so much with my internal team, but also with clients, is what is known as the Amazon essay or the Amazon six pager. So at Amazon, what they do is they distribute 6 pages of a document with like, okay, this is the decision we're making. Here's the background. Here's why. Blah blah blah. You sort of get all the information, and everybody reads for 10, 20 minutes, and then we talk about it. So instead of, it's an alternative to somebody presents a PowerPoint for like 40 minutes, and then maybe we have 10 minutes
yeah,
of discussion and quickly, and whatever, we'll decide next time. And by doing it that way, I think you present everybody with the information in the room. Now we all have the same information in front of us, whatever it is, either printed or on whatever, and we all had the time to read it through, and now we can talk about it, and now we
yeah,
can do the problem solving. And so it's a bit of a corporate version of like the Harvard business cases,
yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
are like you read those beforehand, and then somebody just guides you through the thinking and blah blah blah, and there's and so that would be my preferred way to do it. That's the overhaul, or maybe that's the jump I like to make. And the reason is twofold. One of them is I get tired of the material too after like as
Yeah.
long as I've been teaching it. It's just like, all right, here's that joke again that I make around Pokemon, and here's that other thing that I always say, or whatever, And so it's like, and so I don't want to keep going through the motions, and it needs more. So the interactivity that you're describing, the just sort of, I guess the conceptual
Get them
thinking.
off a screen, right? Like, yeah, imagine them, everyone, they roll into class, they pick up their printed course pack off the top of your desk, and they sit down and they read for 30 minutes. And then that is, you know, and then there's a discussion, right? And then that kind of
I'm
scaffolds
gonna try.
maybe.
I'm gonna try that next semester. I'm gonna at
Or
least.
what I would recommend is that you don't try and reorganize your entire class around something like that, but you pick maybe like 3 class days throughout the whole
Yeah.
semester to try something like that out. So you never want to totally overhaul a class. That's a nightmare. But it's like, are there
No, no,
three
no.
classes you're
That's.
especially bored by where you think that you could like do this differently? And maybe at the end they have to write something and that is something that you grade, right? But you grade it in a pretty like, you know, pass fail, or like there's only 3 possible grades they could get, and
No,
that
that's a good idea.
becomes an assessment for, so there's an opening reading, an in class like big discussion. I
Hmm.
mean, model a boardroom, model the like you could make it super interactive, and then at the end they sit down for 30 minutes and they have to write a prompt in relationship to like,
Yeah, I'm gonna try it because it's sort of been like staring at me. So I've written a few case studies more recently, and it's so there's a fundamental resource issue here. It's like, which is, I'm not a full-time professor. I'm just a guy who has a class a week, and I do it really for shits and giggles. So this incurs a substantial amount of work. Now
I
with the
bet
power of
AI could help
AI,
you.
I can do it in 20 minutes. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
that. But it's, help me write this into a business case. But I, one of the, because where I end up with the current version of that is we go over current events, right? And so at the beginning of class is like, this is what happened. These are the things I noted. What did y'all see in the world? And then one or two will say something. And so now we have like 20 minutes, sometimes more, of things that are recent, that are related to the subject matter of the class at large. That's a lot of fun, and that's because it's interactive. The only restraint is that over time, sort of the people that talk all the time sort of self-select, and everybody else is like, oh, they'll do all the talking and keep him busy. It's easy for me. And so, I think, the idea of like printing out 60 copies of a case study, making them read it, sit through it, and then ask questions or answer questions around it or whatever, conceptualize, that could be a little bit more encouraging for them to like step out of their own comfort zone, because they do tend to sit back and relax a little too much. That's the part I dislike. So okay, I'm
Yeah,
gonna try to do that.
laptops down, students forward, That's
Yeah, I don't allow laptops in general for this reason, but that's a good one. I like that. Okay, done.
see what we got done here today?
You know, growth is progress. Let's
Um,
do speaking of exit tickets, you want to do
exit
three,
tickets. Yeah, let's do
two?
some exit tickets. I don't know if we have. I mean, you only got you have a hard out in 9 minutes, but let's start with your favorite one, and we'll see how far we get.
Well, actually, so before anything else, is there anything you would like me to ask Reggie tonight?
I don't have any thoughts.
You don't
No,
have any
I'm
thoughts?
fine.
No. Well,
Fine.
okay.
Like I don't have any like CEO appropriate thoughts. Like
I'm sure you do. You're just too shy. Okay, let me ask you an AI question then. So one of the exit tickets was we talked last week about games as a lens to get consumers to
celebrity.
adopt and to no, we'll talk about celebrity in a moment if you want, but
No, no, no. I thought that's what you were going back to. Sorry, I'll shut up.
the you totally derailed my thought. We talked about technologies and how games and play sort of are prominent in that always where technologists go like, oh look, we have this application in the form of play, and so therefore consumers will adopt it and so on. So the metaverse was one, and like metaverse seemed like a cool idea, and and then Roblox of course became the poster child, and Fortnite. Like, see, that's exactly how it's going to be. It's going to be this socio-economic busyness that people have. They live their lives in this three-dimensional internet version or whatever. And so one of the questions that came from that was like with regards to AI. And so in a very rudimentary way, I'm curious how you would answer the following. Will developing games cost less if all companies started to use AI? And how would it affect the quality of the games? How would you, I know that you love AI. I know that you think it is
I
an
mean,
incredible
it's more
invention.
that this is an ungainly question, right? And so the first thing I would do is that say that you've asked a bad question because you've tried to ask a universal, right? Um,
Ooh.
and so we don't ask questions about whether everything everywhere all in all ways will go up or down based on X, right? Right. It's a question type that flattens the actual complexity of what we're talking about, right? What does it mean to use AI, first of all, in what applications? I think there are certain segments of the market that are more amenable to this than others, right? Where the business model lends itself to automation more readily, right? I think of mobile
Hmm.
gaming as probably a place that will get eaten by the AI machine very, very quickly, right? Because a lot of it's been slop for a long time anyway, right? Like the kind of iterative slopification of mobile gaming has been in existence before AI, right? Like,
Flop.
and so the question is like, will if all companies started using AI? I mean, this is a it's an unanswerable question,
Hmm.
right? Because what do you think that means, right? I mean, save money.
Hmm.
What a lot of I feel like we are already seeing examples of companies that are discovering that it costs so much to pay tokens to do coding that they're going back to hiring junior coders because it's
Hmm.
cheaper to hire a junior coder than it is to pay the tokens to have AI do some forms of like very rudimentary programming that just kind of needs to get done for these things,
Hmm.
right? Like I think it would have a pretty yeah. It's kind of like it's a question with so few specifics you can't really answer it.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think that like what does this person even think AI is being used for in games right now? Like first of all, could you do that at this moment? No, right?
Hmm.
And like what do we think it means to claims are will games get better or worse? Like what does that even what are these qualifiable
Unqualifiable
generalization?
question. Right.
What does that even mean or imply, right? So this is the kind of thing where I would start asking questions back to the student of like, what do you mean by this term, this term,
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
term,
Hmm.
this comparison, right? Like this is a kind of issue of like question formation, right? How do we ask a question that is answerable, right?
Interesting. Yeah, I'm with you on all this. Like, it's too general. Like, this is exactly where, like, if this was, let's say, part of a paper proposal, right? Sort of like I'm going to talk in my paper about this thing. It's like, okay,
Yeah, it's a
first
problem
of all,
of scope, right? It's a
define the company, define the technology, define the moment. Is this a Brazilian indie studio 20 years ago, or is this
yeah,
EA now that it's part of the Saudi sovereign wealth fund or whatever? Like all of those factors would uh,
yeah, they matter,
have a
right?
they all matter, and at the same time, you know, I think the kernel in there is sort of like this commodification of technology. Like we all do this thing now. Yeah, but that's never the case because in fact, like in design, it's always or whatever in innovation, it's zigging when everyone else is zagging. That seems to be sort of a natural component of it. So you're going to start to see, and in fact, demonstrably that's already the case, a tendency towards a push away from things like AI, where people go, I'm playing cardboard games only. In the same way that social media have sort of become this like ubiquitous evil presence, people start using dumb phones or they get off their phones by design, by choice. And so AI will probably go the same way. Like, there's going to be the contingent of people that just reject it outright or don't feel like it's necessary.
Yeah, but I think in the mainstream game industry, where particularly its applications may be more opaque, right? So, like,
Hmm.
I went to this huge talk that Ubisoft gave at GDC, and they were demonstrating, like, stem to stern, how they built, an AI model that can now do concept art for them. That's not an output a player will ever recognize in a game, right? But what they're doing is basically building a model that allows them to never hire a junior, like, concept art person ever again, right?
No, completely agree. That's
And that's the benefit theoretically, right? And so it allows for, like, higher level people will just use this tool to create gobs of iteration constantly. I mean, it is one of these things where, like, one of the things AI does is because it speeds up the work, it's going to create more new kinds of work. But the problem
mhm.
is, without people entering at the bottom of the chain, who replaces that person who has discernment, curatorial eye, who has experience with, like, creating this stuff themselves, and therefore they have a kind of embodied knowledge about what works and what doesn't, right? That I think a lot of these companies are, without realizing it, or right, because they're not motivated by their long term, they're motivated by their short term. They're kind of hobbling themselves in the sense that they are decimating an entire generation of skill gain for younger employees, that they're like, where is this expertise going to come from? You can't actually teach someone, you can't, like, AI, there isn't a set of AI bullet points that teaches you how to have a good eye, right? That has to be built over time, right? It's
So you
embodied.
agree
I
that
agree with what?
only by doing do you get better.
Yes,
Okay,
of
so we
course.
agree on all this stuff.
Yeah, we agree. I think that the function of the classroom is a bit in this moment to build a stronger boundary box around what it means to have to do it, right? And that leaving that entirely in their hands is going to, is, I'm not going to assist you in not taking this class seriously because you have a easy out. And I think the temptation of the easy out is, like, quite overwhelming.
I
I
like
don't
the way
know
you
that as
phrase
a
it.
student I would have not used it myself, you know? Like,
I think it's part of being a student is using all of these things all of the time because this is the time where you get to,
but this
right?
is this is like, this is unprecedented. There's nothing like this that exists, right? The only comparable thing to
It,
AI, to, the AI homework machine, would have been to be rich enough to pay someone to do all your work for you. Otherwise, cheating at scale was just not plausible, right?
well, cheating, well, just like I would argue that this is similar to like early dot com,
Oh,
the in the fact that like like look, you couldn't necessarily like cheat in your exams or papers, but it's more along the lines of like here's a technology that's so disruptive to these institutions like universities and publishers and copyright owners and so on, that in many ways it allows you to do things that you couldn't do before, and institutions had to catch up. You know, you forget I'm Gen X, so like I've seen these things kind of come and go, like
Yeah, I remember
generation.
the .com boom too, Yost.
Okay,
Like
no,
I'm not
I don't
like
know, I don't know. You're like 17, you know, 17-year-old
listen,
historian.
listen, Grandpa. One of us is a technology historian here, okay?
Yeah,
Like,
it's not me. No, I recognize it. It's the but the first-hand experience, like when we had internet on campus in the early 2000s, we would steal so much music because you could just do that. You could download applications and you could plug in your iTunes to the Wi-Fi on campus, and you could see everybody else's iTunes category
yeah,
catalog and download
I
everything.
also could do that in the early 2000s, Yost.
You
Like,
know, and so my point is like and it was hugely disruptive for institutions. They, of course, universities didn't want to get sued, and publishers didn't want to lose their money, and blah 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 blah, all that. But you learn to navigate, and you learn the value systems that then come to control and define and describe these technologies. And so AI, same thing. Like, I find it fascinating that Anthropic is very worried about its source code being publicly available on the internet when they, in fact, of course, are totally guilty of borrowing other people's IP to build their own product set. So it's it reminds me just of where we were 20, 25 years ago. And
yeah,
you
but
should absolutely
the
experiment
application
with it.
utility is totally different, you know? Like it's not simply a change in you still couldn't make the internet do things for you in the same way, you know?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, Daddy's got to go. But anyway,
That's
uh,
that. Like, your opinion is making me have to leave this conversation. No, I feel like we need to do like a full AI episode. So,
yeah.
and then I will just give it a prompt, and then I will read whatever it says, and you do the same. And then Lane said, blah 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 blah
I
blah.
mean, we can actually. There are technologies that will just allow us to create an AI podcast, which, like,
We should do, we should do.
We could feed it all of our content, and then say, create the latest. Here's the news for the week. Create the latest episode, and I would want to walk into the sea. I'm sure is where that would leave me. All
So
right, buddy
dramatic.
boy. I will see you tonight. Good chat as always, and for those of you who listen to us for some reason, have a good weekend, good night, and good games. Unboxing, Play and Profit for the Gaming Curious is an independent production by Joost van Joinen and Lane Nooney. Our producer is Keaton Ireland. Our logo was designed by Moira Zhang. For more from Unboxing, subscribe to our newsletter at buttondown.com/unboxingpodcast. Unboxing episodes can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and wherever else you get your content.